Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Before we start our talk show, I would like to address my biggest gratitude to Yang Berbahagia Encik Aminuddin bin Abu Bakar, Director of Teacher Training Institute Tun Hussein on campus, Yang Bursa Dr. Muhammad Zairi bin Hussein, Deputy Director of Teacher Training Institute Tun Hussein on campus, Miss Nani Johara binti Johari, Head of Language Department Teacher Training Institute Tun Hussein on campus, Mr. Ahmad Safwan bin Sulaiman, Course Coordinator, TSLB1114, English Language Skills in Academic Context, Teacher Training Institute, Tunusan on campus. Ladies and gentlemen, Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh, and good evening, and welcome to our Global Classroom Summit Talk Show 2026. So before we start our talk show, these are the 6 rules that you have to follow. So first one, please make sure that your microphone is muted. This session will be recorded for educational purposes, and please stay until the end of the session for the e-certificate. So without further ado, these are the 3 speakers that will be contributing for today's talk show under the theme Deep versus Surface Learning. And our title for today is Student Motivation and Learning Approaches, Deep versus Surface Learning. So we will start our talk show with a very simple questions that I would like the audience to ponder. So based on the slides, you can see 2 different pictures, and the first one is indicates deep learner, and the second one is surface learner. Okay, some of you might be wondering what deep learner or deep learning or even surface learner or learning is all about. So when it comes to deep learner is basically someone who integrates knowledge into a coherent and connected structure. Um, Usually, they are the kind of individuals who try to understand ideas, connect knowledge, reflect, and apply ideas in different situations. And this kind of approach definitely promotes long-term retention and prepares them to solve real-world problems. So this kind of approach usually motivated by genuine interest in comprehension, which means that they actually someone who intrigued to understand something. They are the one who make an approach and who make a move to understand an information or to understand the material deeper. And they often questions themselves like, how does this relate to what I already know? Because they want to connect the dots between the knowledge. And when it comes to surface learner, it is someone who treats knowledge as discrete and unrelated pieces of information. And they usually someone who often apply just to memorize facts, studying just merely to pass the exams, and only contributes minimal engagement. And they often ask like, how much do I need to know to pass the exam? So as you can see on the slide, these are the table of comparison regarding the differences of deep learning and surface learning in terms of definition, primary goal, and type of motivation. And as I stated before, that when it comes to deep learning, it usually driven by mastery and conceptual understanding. And when it comes to motivation, it often associated with intrinsic motivation and mastery-oriented goals. And surface learner is someone who completion of tasks, or they are someone who put or prioritize the grade. They put the grades on pedestals. So what is the benefits of deep learning? So the first benefits of deep learning is it builds conceptual understanding and critical thinking skills. So as you can see, conceptual understanding, it involves recognizing relationship between ideas, grasping underlying principle. And this kind of process is developed through engagement with underlying reasoning, which means that when it comes to someone who apply deep learning approach, they always try to make a rationale behind the knowledge that they receive. They try to understand the underlying concept and they we prioritize the 5W, which is like why, who, when, where, those kind of question, and recognition of patterns and principle, active connection of ideas, and application of understanding in unfamiliar or real world scenarios, which they try to connect the dots and apply it in real life. I'll give you an analogy. For example, for medical students or law students, they often have like a medical terms or law terms that they have to memorize. But instead of memorizing it passively, they have to understand it in order to apply it in a real life scenarios, because they cannot just one day they graduated, they have their own job, and then they just depend too much on the information that they have on their brain. They cannot do that, right? So that's why it's very important, because it helps your brain to apply or help the cognitive development, whether critical thinking skills and whatnot. And these are the study that was conducted by Rahani and Nabila, which it showed an upward trend of students' cognitive abilities, especially in critical thinking skills, after the implementation of a curriculum that is designed around deep learning principles. So now I'll pass to the second speaker to explain more about benefits of deep learning.
Well, thank you, Afika, for such a wonderful sharing earlier. So, based on what Afika just said earlier, I believe that when we already acquire conceptual understanding and critical thinking skills, we definitely want to retain the knowledge for a long time. So, this is what leads us to the next benefit of deep learning, which is it strengthens long-term retention. So, first thing that you have to know is deep learning is a long process. It takes a lot of time and effort. It is a process that leads to and aids you to build lasting structure in your brain that will make you promote meaningful understanding rather than rote memorization, and only then you can remember what you have learned for a long time. So deep learning also allows your brain to organize or integrate new knowledge into existing mental frameworks. So if you have never heard about existing mental framework, what it is about, so just think of how a toddler first learned about car. They think every car is the same. They have four wheels, move fast on the road, and that is their original mental framework. And then when they grow older, they start to notice differences. They start to notice different logos, different shape, different patterns, and that they started to think, oh, that's car and mommy's car are different. And this is where their mental framework expands. They transform knowledge from just car into something else, like different brands like Proton, Honda, and Nissan, and whatnot. So this is why deep learning is often called as knowledge transforming. It demands you to think critically, explore meaning, build arguments. It demands you to relate new information that you got into what you already know. So these are the examples of active engagement that aids you and make your brain think that what you learn matters and makes you retain it for a long time. And in addition, deep learning also help you build stronger cognitive connection, as when you keep on thinking critically, exploring topics and all, when you study a subject, a topics and whatnot, the cells in your brain connect to one another, and that is how it builds stronger cognitive connectivity. And that is also how deep learning allows you to easily recall what you have learned and apply knowledge across a varied situation and environment. So the thing that you have to remember is true mastery is not how well you are able to reproduce what you have learned, but it is how well you can retain what you have learned and also connect it with the things that you have learned before. So moving on to the next.
Well, thank you so much, Ayn. Well, after all the benefits that we discussed or presented before, of course, there are certain challenges of this approach, which is deep learning. So, based on the name itself, deep learning, of course, it requires you to immerse yourself in the understanding that deep knowledge. You have to pour a lot of effort, which, when it comes to pouring a lot of effort, it also means active engagement among the learners because students must actively process, organize, analyze, which this kind of stuff definitely requires a lot of concentration. And because of that, it definitely demands sustained concentration and it requires a lot of mental effort. Because when it comes to deep learning, you cannot just be an individual or just be a merely recipient of information. It cannot be just that because you have to understand or dig it deeper by questioning a lot, creating a lot of assumption. And learning deeply requires reflection, critical analysis, which at the end of the day, it somehow can feel exhausting or overwhelming, especially when you try to understand a complex material or unfamiliar materials. And we cannot deny that when it comes to it, it requires sustained concentration. It also consumes a lot of time and it requires persistency because you have to reflect or do a repeated reflection on complex concept in order for you to ensure that you not just memorize it, but you are able to apply it in a daily life or in a any kind of scenario. And this kind of we call productive struggle is indeed beneficial, but it somehow can reduce your motivation if it's too complex. You might at the end of the day feel overwhelmed by it. You might confuse at times, but at the end of the day, although it is demanding, we have to understand that the effort invested in deep learning actually develop resilience and intellectual independence. So, moving on to the third speaker is of deep learning.
Thank you, Afika, for your insight. And I might as well wanted to add up one of the challenges of deep learning. So when you are using or initiating deep learning in your lab, it is important for you to have a structured guidance or a proper guidance while you are using this type of learning. Uh, at first, at first, you need to have an effective facilitation for you to develop meaningful understanding. What I mean by facilitation is your teacher, because today teachers' role not only to deliver content or knowledge to your student, but teachers nowadays also need to facilitate thinking for their student. For example, teacher can asking probing question for the student. With this way, we can avoid the weakness in the facilitation and can make the discussion become more deeper. With that, students can develop their opinion and deeper reasoning and also their high order thinking skill. On the other hand, it is important to have guidance while using this type of learning because differences in prior knowledge affect student critical thinking development. It means that different students studying on a different type of learning, different studying background, and it is important for you for the teachers to note what are the type of student they are learning. For example, one student maybe already know basic economic concept, while the other student might still struggling with the concept. So naturally, this will differing between the two students of how they are thinking. So because of that, teacher plays an important role in giving the guidance for the student during this type of learning.
Thank you so much, Aina. Now, after all of the topics, all benefits and challenges that we have discussed before, of course, it may sound daunting to you. You might feel overwhelmed by it, but don't worry, we do have a strategy that we can try to apply in enhancing deep learning. And you have to understand that our mission is not to replace, but we want to enhance deep learning. So first, what you can do is that you can try to apply a collaborative learning. So what I mean is that instead of you learn something on your own or individually, you can try other friends, you can try other people who is on the same lane as you, who apply the same kind of approach as you. Why collaborative learning works? Because when it comes to collaborative learning, students can share ideas, contribute ideas, and challenge assumption and view topics from multiple perspectives. Because if you just sit on your own and study on your own, you might not know what kind of area that you have to improve, what kind of things that you need to fix in order to uplift yourself. But if you work with other people, you will have multi perspective, and this is very much aligned with what Nicole in 2021 said, which by evaluating work of others, learners can reflect on their own cognitive blind spot. And another one is that when you learn collaboratively, you will have a clear goal, because if you learn in groups by applying deep learning too, you will know exactly what you are trying to achieve, which you definitely focuses on effort for meaningful learning rather than simply completing a task or memorizing it passively just for you to pass the exam or get a good grades, right? So maybe you can try a lot of techniques, like you be in pair and share with your partner. And this kind of approach definitely articulate your thinking skills, and it reflect and refine your reasoning, and it help you to um, make sure that your cognitive development works, like critical thinking, analyzing data, um, problem solving skills. And after all, collaborative learning is definitely active and engaging, and it also help you to be someone who have various skills. It's like killing two birds with one stone. And you will also have various kind of feedback from your peers, where learners provide and respond to constructive peer comments on what areas that you're supposed to study or you have to improve. So I think we're done with deep learning. Now we will be moving on to surface learning, and I'll pass to the next speaker to dig more on what surface learning is all about.
Okay, well, thank you, Afika. And as we already know everything about deep learning. We know the challenges, we know the benefits, and also the strategies. We know that deep learning is for the pro. It is for the ones who already master the basic concepts and whatnot. On the other hand, surface learning is for beginners. It supports the early stage of learning. Yes, it is the benefits of surface learning. It supports the early stage. So I want you to think of how a child learn to speak, of their language development before they can construct a full sentences like I want to eat, I want to drink. They first spend months learning isolated words like mama, papa, eat, drink. Those single words are their foundation that later on will build their language in the future, that can help them to communicate and build complex sentences. And then every learner in every subject, no matter it is literature, biology, mathematics, or else, they need this same foundation that we call it as surface learning. So remember, when you encounter a topic for the very first time, you are in the surface learning phase, when you don't have any idea about what the subject is going to be, what the topic is going to be. So surface learning is the foundation for anything more complex. It is not the opposite of deep learning, but it is the first step towards deep learning. It is the initial stage of learning. So at this stage of surface learning, you are not expected to analyze complex idea or apply concepts critically because you just learn about it, right? So instead, what you have to do is you just need to recognize key terms and grasp basic definition, because you have to build recognition and familiarity, and this familiarity then allows you to engage with the subject without feeling overwhelmed. And this is how we acquire basic ideas and factual information before we can ever begin to relate or apply them in real life situation. So in this early stage, we have to learn essential vocabulary or memorize key term first. And for some people, I know this might look like simple repetition, but from educational perspective, it is actually a form of overlearning that will create automaticity in the future. You know, when you practice overlearning, where you memorize key terms and basic informations, only then you can run the basic automatically in your mind. It's like when you look at the question on your test paper, you can straight away know what concept to use because the knowledge is already there. It's already engraved in your mind. So when you have mastered this technique, only then you can finally be free to focus on other higher order thinking skills like connecting ideas, solving problems, and build deeper understanding, or just deep learning. So in short, surface learning is not the end, but it is the beginning of mastery. Just like how a toddler learns isolated words before they can build complete sentences and complex sentences, it is also how we can learn basics. We can recognize first before we can move to deeper thinking skills.
Yes, I am very much agree with you. We often criticizing surface learning, but let's be fair, there are several benefits of surface learning. Surface learning makes us utilizing our cognitive effort lesser compared to deep learning, because when we are using this type of learning, we only wanted to grasp basic facts quickly to avoid complex analysis, because let's be honest, not all subjects require you to use your brain power. So this is like a strategy for you to use for a more and simple subject or topic. And we students are often facing tight deadlines or examination. So using this type of learning, surface learning, is actually helpful for them to use it when they are time constrained. And with this type of learning, they also can improve their short-term performance if they did it regularly. For example, if the student have exam for next week, they can use this type of learning so that they can focus on high frequency topic to secure marks effectively before them started to use the deep learning for more complex topic. And on the other hand, it is essential for you to use this type of learning, because you can use your mental energy for another task. When you have a lot of more energy, you can use it for more complex tasks using deep learning method. So, in short, surface learning is not a useless learning method, but it is an efficient, practical, and helpful method if you are really using it in the right approach. So, it is important. This type of learning, it is also important for you to implement in your learning life. Even though there are benefits of surface learning, but we must not overlook the challenges that it comes with. It is when we are using surface learning, we tend to promote performance anxiety to ourselves. Because students mostly mainly wanted to pass their exam, only wanted to get a perfect mark. In Because of this, their motivation tend to shift. They begin to make their fear of failure become stronger compared to the desire of them to understand the topic. They will ask themselves, what if I fail? More than they ask themselves, do I understand this? And because of this, the student is mostly driven by failure compared to curiosity while learning. On the other hand, time pressure also increases stress and nervousness using this type of learning, because this type of learning usually comes when you are last minute revision, or you are always cramming at one time, and you only have mindset in your mind just to pass the test compared to that you wanted to really dive deep into the topic. You will rush your note, and at the end you will feel overwhelmed with this type of learning, even though it is not. So, lastly, the student might feel insecure about their knowledge. For example, the student will be overthinking, like they're asking themselves if I memorize it right, or they will ask if the examination question is different from what they are memorizing. And this type of studying will increase their fear and stress, and they are more self-doubting uh, while they are studying. So, using this type of learning could lead you to just avoiding failure compared to you really wanted to understand what the topic is all about.
So I agree with Aina because as a student, we often just study to pass an exam, especially when we have multiple tests in a week. So we just we just memorize everything just to pass an exam. So moving on to the next challenge of surface learning, let me ask you a question, ladies and gentlemen. What if the feeling of easy learning is actually a warning sign that the knowledge that you have is already beginning to fade away? You are already beginning to forget what you have learned. So that is what the psychologists call the illusion of learning. It happens when we rely on habits that feels productive, like simply rereading chapter over and over, or again, like cramming an entire subject one night before the test comes. Little did we know that we are creating a false sense of mastery. So, because this strategy feels smooth and effortless, we often mistake or misinterpret familiarity for true understanding when it is actually a trap. So, to understand why, we have to know about the nature of our brain. So, when you study, when we study, we use a part of our brain that is called conscious mind. So you need to remember, our conscious mind is tiny, it is slow and effortful. It is the part of you listening to our talk show right now, processing our words at a time. So when you study, you highlight sentences, scan each page, and to you, it might feels like understanding, but in reality, you just recognize the words because this is where your conscious mind is being tricked, because remember it is small, so it can only hold a few pieces of information at once. So when you try to read the whole page where it shows the information, huge amount of information, more than your brain can process, it deals with the page, with the text, with surface level processing. So when we rely solely on this kind of surface learning, we are not learning at all. We are just we are just recognizing the words because it is right there in front of us. So our goal shift from true understanding to just simply reproducing information to pass an exam. And as a result, this will turn into a fragile foundation because we store information in isolation in our mind. So just like what Aina said earlier, students who stay stuck at this level often experience high level of anxiety because they have the information, or at least they had it, but they don't have the understanding. They cannot use what they have memorized in any meaningful way, and all they have is isolated information in their brain. So Aina, do you think there is any solution for this?
Yes, of course. course, Ain, there's a solution for the type of learning, which is you use spaced repetition in your spaced repetition activity while you are studying. What is meant by spaced repetition, it is you are reviewing your information at regular intervals, and it helps you to transform from your short-term memory to long-term memory. For example, today you are studying vocabulary, and after 3 days you are reviewing it again, and maybe after a week you are reviewing it again. And with this type of regulation, you can develop a stronger memory compared to you only do it once. And after that, you also can use active recall technique, which means you need to close the book. You just task yourself, write down everything that you remember, and answer practice question. And after that, when you are done with the question, you can highlight or add up any notes using another color of pen to notes yourself that which part that you are still lack of. With this type of learning, it is can strengthen your memory more effectively than just rote memorization. And another thing, you also can focus on key concept before expanding understanding, because we use this type of learning for basic knowledge. So when you are still on the basic term, it is better for you at a regular time. You also try to understand what the topic is all about. So at the end, even though you strengthen your memory, you also understand what you are trying to learn from the topic.
Well, thank you so much to our panelists here. So I'll make a short summary on what we have discussed today. And well, of course, with both approach, whether deep learning or surface learning, they both have their pros and cons, their advantages and disadvantages. For example, like deep learning, it builds critical thinking, but then somehow it requires it demands high cognitive load. But on the other hand, when it comes to surface learning, it supports the early stage of learning and it only utilizes less cognitive effort. But at the end of the day, it can also promotes performance anxiety, and we can see that there are always like positivity and negativity to each approaches. But I would love to ask like a very simple questions to our panelists here that maybe we can discuss briefly. Which my question goes like, is deep learning realistic in large classroom setting with limited time? Maybe any of our panelists can share your opinion right now.
Well, in my opinion, I think we definitely cannot because, as we have learned earlier, deep learning requires a lot of time and effort. So, it is not the best for us to implement it in a large classroom with limited times. However, relying solely on surface learning cannot really help as it just makes you memorize things without meaningful understanding. Maybe we can implement surface learning, but the students might be struggling to answer higher order thinking skills during the exam. Aina, do you have any perspective on this?
I am partially agree with Ain, because I think in a large classroom, it is better for you to combine both technique of learning, which is tape and surface learning. But on the foundation term or the introduction, I think I'm suggesting for you to just start to use surface learning for the basic one, for you just do rote memorization. But towards the end of the more complex topic, it is better for you to initiate deep learning so that you can have a meaningful understanding of the topic itself.
Well, thank you so much to both panelists here. I think well, my opinion, I'll be, of course, teacher maybe can merge both approach because it is quite impossible to actually apply deep learning in large classroom setting, especially with the big, like large amount of numbers of students in class. So after all, it depends on the students on how to apply. Maybe they can apply deep learning approaches or surface learning approaches when is needed back home. So teachers can try to balance instead of replacing, maybe they can try merge of them and try a balanced approach between deep learning and surface learning. So I think we finally come to the end of the session. Now we will be moving on to the next session, which is questions and answer session. So for the active listener, you can ask or you can turn your mic and ask the question for us. And it is best for you to paste or to provide the same questions at the chat box below to avoid any confusion. Thank you.
For last minute revision, is deep learning possible or is memorizing is the only option? I will paste it in the comment section.
Next question is, can open book exams uh, promote deep learning? Why or why not? Uh, can open book exams promote deep learning? Why or why not?
For me, what do you guys think about critical thinking? How does critical thinking relate to deep learning? Hmm. How does critical thinking relate to deep learning?
For the third question, can you paste your questions on the chat box? Thank you. And with that, we need 2 more minutes to discuss the answer, and we'll get to you later.
Apa nak? WhatsApp.
Okay, I would like to answer the first question from Hamsha, which is for last minute revision, is deep learning possible or is memorizing the only option? From my perspective, it is possible for you to combine both type of learning even though you have time constraint, but it is important for you to properly have a plan which topic that you need to use surface learning and which one you need to use deep learning, because if you cannot plan it properly, it will eventually can disrupt, can be overwhelming, even though the topic is simple to study.
So now I'll be answering the second question, which is, can open books exam promote deep learning? Why or why not? Well, for me personally, yes, open book exams can definitely promote deep learning. But one thing that you have to understand, after all, it depends on how they are designed, because we all know that open book exam is something that you can, students can refer to notes, so students can refer to the information that they have from the notebook. But then, because they don't need to memorize or focus on facts, instead they are mostly encouraged to understand the concept and apply them to solve problems. Because if they themselves don't even are not even able to understand the concept of what they learn, then it's going to be hard for them to answer the question, even if they have the books beside them. So, as I stated before, deep learning, it promotes critical thinking and meaningful learning. So open book exam definitely supports deep learning, only when they require application, or analyzing the questions, create reasoning, and not just merely copying the answer. So yes, my last answer is yes, open book exam definitely promote deep learning.
Now I will be answering the third question from Hazim. How does critical thinking relates to deep learning? Is it? Okay, so deep learning, critical thinking requires you to analyze idea, evaluate evidence, and make judgments. So these are the processes. These are the processes that in the center of critical thinking. So when students engage in critical thinking, uh, it is a form of deep learning, because remember, deep learning is a process where you relate ideas, translate and transform knowledge. So the answer is, yeah, deep learning, critical thinking relates to deep learning by practicing analyze ideas, evaluate evidence, and also make judgments.
And I think we finally come to the end of the talk show. Lastly, I would like to say thank you so much, everyone, for joining our talk show for today. And I hope that all of you here gained some insight from whatever that we presented or discussed before. Thank you so much, everyone. Assalamualaikum.
Thank you everyone for participating.
Thank you, everyone.